I'm gonna call you by your Discord name. By
Yeah,
the way.
that's fine.
Severalizer. Good to
So,
see you.
good to see you as well.
So, I think you came into my community maybe about October, November, something like that.
Around, I would say around December actually.
Yeah, around
Before, like
December.
November, December.
And now here we are in Tire, an
Tire.
Arab village in Israel.
Oh yeah.
So you are what some might call an Arab Israeli, others would call Palestinian, Palestinian Israeli, 48er.
Yeah.
Uh, do you have much of an opinion on all the different terms?
Well, some people don't like some of the terms. Obviously, Israeli Jews are not comfortable with the term Palestinian here. It normally defaults to be a political response. They don't like that. They think you are making a political statement when you say Palestinian. 48er, majority of the people don't know what that means unless you're from here. Like you are an Arab who lives inside of Israel or in the West Bank or Gaza. They know what 48er means. We use that to tell them that we're from like El Dakhil, which is the inside, basically with blue IDs. And then Israeli Arab is what we call ourselves when we don't want any problems, we don't want any trouble from like companies, Israeli Jews. So it's just the identifier between us and West Bank Palestinians and Gazans. It's there's these terms for each, and each one has its use.
Yeah, because I feel like most of the people we've met today just passively call themselves Arab, like or Arab Israeli. But to you, that's more likely to be kind of like a way of saying I don't want trouble, or
Most of the time, yeah, but there is also another factor to that. When people say they're Arab here, because they're making the distinction from other citizens here, which is the other citizens are Jews, Druze, Bedouins. They don't go by Israeli. No, have you heard some even Israeli Jews say like I'm Israeli? It's weird to call yourself Israeli when you live in Israel and you're being interviewed in Israel, unless you're a tourist from outside telling you, oh, I'm Australian or something. So most people will do the identifier here for what's like is in the inside of the group, which are all Israelis. That might be why they're telling you they're Arab, because the only other majority group is Jewish. It's not necessarily just to avoid trouble. When they say Israeli Arab, they are absolutely trying to avoid trouble.
okay. Um, so when other people refer to you as that, does it feel like you're invalidating your Palestinian identity, or is it just kind of
It,
are you used to it?
it depends who says it. There is some people who I know say it with the purpose of invalidating my identity, and obviously those people have the same opinions that are normally, oh, I don't think Palestinians are a real thing. They're a made-up thing. They're Arabs. 22 Arab states. When they have that type of narrative, I know they will call me Arab Israeli, so they can get rid of my Palestinian identity. But if, for example, like you or some other streamer is saying Arab Israeli, I know you're just trying to get the distinction between the populations to talk about their views. It's not to invalidate my identity.
Yeah, because even when you feel like you're saying Palestinian Israeli, that feels awkward as well, because you're just kind of naming like the two groups that
Yeah, it's
typically are
confusing to
trying
other
to oppose
people.
each other.
Other
Yeah.
people don't understand what an Israeli Palestinian or a Palestinian Israeli is. They don't know that it's like ethnically Palestinian and nationally Israeli. And it bothers them, unfortunately. They think it's an oxymoron when they say Palestinian Israeli or Israeli Palestinian. But it's more welcomed in academia lately, I've seen. I've had Jewish teachers who write on the board Israeli Palestinians instead of Israeli Arabs if they talk about it. It's a lot more welcomed in academia than like everyday life.
Okay. Um, do you feel like an equal citizen?
Uh, Equal citizens, there's plenty of things that I feel like we're not equal in, and not necessarily, some of them are to our benefit, some of them are to our like disadvantage. One of them to our benefit is that we don't have to serve in the army, and obviously serving in the army for an Arab citizen, it's kind of like a humiliating. It's humiliating. It's not a pretty look. If you take the Jewish sector, where like not serving is socially ostracized, people will look at you differently and look at you negatively if you don't serve as a Jewish citizen. But if you're an Arab, if you do serve, you will be looked at socially negatively. Like people will not appreciate that you served in the IDF if you are from a community that doesn't normally serve in the IDF. Even Haredim, I think that they have that issue. If there's a Haredi that serves in the IDF, he will probably looked at negatively in his community, which I don't think is common. I think there's probably one or two cases of a Haredi actually serving. But yeah, I think it's just like, and then the disadvantages I would say is the constant suspicion. Obviously, I've told you about this. The constant suspicion where we can't do whatever we can't do what we want to do, like Jewish Israelis can, without arousing suspicion. For example, we cannot mouth off to our police officer like Jewish Israelis can.
You can't do a Ben-Gvir on the road.
Yeah, you cannot, even like your freedom of speech, even if it's hateful language, when Jewish Israelis do it, there's no social repercussions, there's no legal repercussions. But for Arabs, there can be both social and legal repercussions. Social as in they'll get fired from their job, legal as in like even if you work for a governmental like institute, like teaching, you could get fired for it. For even like not even saying hateful language, it can be like attending the Nakba Memorial. Like recently, a teacher got fired from her teaching job for attending the Nakba Memorial just because there's Palestinian flags there.
Yeah, and that's why I hear that when people do these interviews, they find that Arab Israelis are less likely to talk than people who live in the West Bank even, because
Yes.
there's more risk.
Yes.
Okay.
So one of the things is, if you had the same opinions as you do as Palestinians in the West Bank, you will not only endanger yourself, you'll endanger your family. Your family will be like on the list that they will be suspicious for like however long is like appropriate for the IDF or Israel or whatnot. But for them, I mean, it's still a danger for West Bank Palestinians to say the things they do, because the IDF can go in and arrest them whenever they want as well. Like if these things are online and the IDF can see them, if it's something that the IDF deems as like insightful, they will go in and arrest you. Similar so here, I think, but social repercussions are probably a lot more common than legal ones here.
Talking about the people being suspicious of you, obviously people tend to understand that Sephardic Jews are more right-wing and typically more
Mizrahi?
than Ashkenazi Jews. Do you feel that like on an interpersonal level as well? Do you feel like if you're in front of a Mizrahi Jew, they're more likely to like give you shit than an Ashkenazi? Or
I mean, based on my experience, that has been the case, unfortunately. I don't normally think it's because they're Mizrahi or they're Ashkenazi. It depends on the. I have seen that racism from Mizrahis seems to follow the same pattern, but racism from Ashkenazis seem to differ from one person to another. It depends. From my perspective, it looks like some of the Ashkenazim, based off personal experiences, they base their racism off of, while Mizrahi Jews base off the racism from what their parents all told them, which is stories of their time during diaspora countries, which is like in whatever Iraq or Egypt or Lebanon or Yemen or whatever. They based that off the stories they heard from their parents, because most of them haven't experienced those stories. But Ashkenazim, I would say most of the time, since it differs, it's probably because of like personal experiences.
We were in the West Bank today, and obviously when you're there, you see a huge sign that says, "This is Area A. Don't go in here. Go at your own risk if you're a tourist or whatever." Very strict, forbidden, very, according to survey data, like a very radicalized population. And then half an hour down the road, we end up somewhere like along here where you can just come up to shops or just come up to Palestinians and just ask them questions, and like you're typically fine. It's quite surprising just how close all that is together.
Super close.
How much do you identify with Palestinians who live in the West Bank, given that, at least according to survey data, they always seem to be much more radicalized than the people who live here?
I think for the most part, the reason we differ is because I don't think Israelis look at me as a combatant. They don't look. There might be suspicions, but I'm never looked at as a threat. Unless like I give them reason from that suspicion to be a threat, they will look at me with just suspicion. Unfortunately for Palestinians in the West Bank, their thought is that Israelis always look at them not with suspicion, but as a threat. And I think the Palestinians, when they are treated that way, where there always could be a threat, they have that same mentality where they respond, where like Israelis, like they don't think Israelis are civilians because they think Israelis don't think of them as civilians either. Unfortunately, like I would say the reason for their radicalism is the lack of communication between two groups. Some people, like you can see, a lot less radicalism from Arabs within Israel, mainly because we understand the Jewish community, we talk to them, we live with them. While in the West Bank, there's the Jewish communities they interact with are IDF soldiers, which are usually violent, normally violent, or settlers, or as your experience today with what they encounter.
Yeah. Yeah, with seeing a Palestinian village with a very radicalized settlement across the road and up one hill, and then on the other hill, on the top of that hill that they're on, there's another settlement. So it's like they're just squished on both sides by two communities that very deliberately took the high ground
Yeah,
as a way of like getting some kind of advantage. Uh, yeah, so you've obviously got like Arab Knesset members in Israel.
Yes.
But I feel like there's never been that much attention paid to them. Like everyone knows about Abbas, and everyone knows about Fatah, and everyone knows about Hamas, Hania. How do you feel like you're more invested in politics in political leadership and parties in the West Bank and Gaza, or at home, or how is it for you?
I am more invested in the politics that happen within Israel, because whatever happens within Israel also influences what happens in the West Bank and in Gaza. I feel like it's quite a bit more important than what the PA does. I wouldn't say it's more important than what Hamas does, because Hamas has proved to be quite a lot more dangerous than Israel gave it credit for. So I don't really know how to say that like I would care about what Hamas is doing. I generally want Hamas gone because I don't think they're beneficial to Israelis or Palestinians or anybody in the region. They are only beneficial to themselves and their leaders abroad. But some people will argue with that because they put the Palestinian, what's it called? The Palestinian, the struggle on the world stage again, which is what a lot of people admire Arafat for. Even though he made a lot of mistakes, even though he fucked up a lot, even though he fucked us over, he put the Palestinian struggle on stage like no other struggle has been on like national TV or global TV or whatever. So I think people will give Hamas credit for that, but at what price? They killed people, innocent people that shouldn't be killed, just for the struggle to be on TV. I don't think that's worth the price to kill innocent people for. Unfortunately, Palestinians also got killed because of what Hamas did. In the thousands, we've never seen this happen before, so I think Hamas is a pretty big player now. You cannot ignore their existence. I ignore like the PA. I don't think the PA is relevant at all. I think we need a new government for the Palestinians that actually want the benefit for the Palestinians, rather than someone who's just sitting there mooching off them.
Which is what you think the PA are doing now?
Yes, I think the PA are just leeching off Palestinians, not helpful at all to Palestinians. I think they're a good placeholder for Israelis because obviously they don't support violence against Israel. They're better than Hamas for Israel, but they're not better for Palestinians. And at the end of the day, if you want the Palestinians to say, you want what's better for Palestinians, not necessarily what's better for Israel. But for Israel to allow it to happen, Israel wants something that's better for it, even if it means a shit deal for Palestinians.
Yeah. So you said that you mentioned Hamas putting the Palestinian struggle onto the world stage. I know recently, I think 3 more European countries have or are just about to recognize the state of Palestine. So you're at like 130, 40 countries now. Quite a lot of countries now recognize Palestine as a state, and General Assembly resolutions. Do you feel like that gives you any optimism for things going forward, or?
Like I said, at what cost though? Like 3 more countries recognize Palestinian sovereignty, but like nearly 40,000 Palestinians have been killed. You could argue the numbers, whatever.
So like leaving that part aside, it's just talking about the recognition in general, like just the fact.
I mean, it's always better to be more right. I hope more countries recognize the Palestinian state because they will push Israel to recognize a Palestinian state, and not just further push for like whatever their solution is, which I don't know what solution Israel's going for. Like I said to you before, I think their solution that they're pushing for is most likely what they did in East Jerusalem, which is make sure annex the area and make them residents. They're not going to make them citizens. They're not going to give them voting rights because they're afraid of what like a half the country being Arab having voting rights would look like. It's not going to look like what they want, so they don't want it.
Yeah, and it's always sold as a kind of sugarcoat. Yeah, we want to share the land, live in peace, but you guys can't vote.
Yes, pretty much.
What do you think should happen in terms
Uh,
of peace?
Well, first off, Hamas needs to be gone for any sort of negotiation with Israel. Israel will not negotiate anything until Hamas is gone, unfortunately, even if it's at the expense of many more Palestinian lives. So Hamas needs to be gone as the first step. Secondly, you need to build trust from Israel within Palestinians, which needs to be done in a way where you punish IDF soldiers who act out of line. You need to punish settlers who act out of line. You need to build that trust from Palestinians to think, for them to understand that you're also trying to look out for them and not rather just looking out for themselves at your expense. So that's one thing that you need to do. Like that's step two, where like Israel needs to build trust within Palestinians for them to trust that Israel wants the best for them. Step three is obviously let Palestinians vote. Maybe once they have the trust within Israel, they'll actually vote for a much less radical government, a government that wants to work within Israel. And obviously, people might refer to the polls where it seems more people are approving of Hamas than before, and they're going to point at October 7th for that reason. I think majority of Palestinians will be more accepting of peace once there's actual hope for peace, rather than just like during this wartime and how radical people are right now, and ask them about peace. Wait until things calm down, ask them about peace, and their opinions are immediately going to change.
Yeah, I think obviously it seems like the problem since the very beginning has been having two national groups living in the same place. They don't want to live in the same country together, but they also don't want to make the necessary concessions to live separately.
Yeah.
So if I was talking to an Israeli Jew, I would probably ask what do you want to? Would you concede East Jerusalem for peace, or would you concede a certain number of refugees coming for peace, or would you concede a certain number of settlements in the West Bank for peace?
Which I assume you're going to get varying different answers from Israeli Jews.
Yeah, so if I was asking you, what do you think is do you think there are any concessions that the Palestinian side should make for peace, and if so, what are they, or should they not?
One of them is, I don't necessarily want to say give up armed struggle. I want to say give up. It's not. I wouldn't even consider armed struggle. I would say give up attacking within Israel proper. That is never going to work out in your favor. It's only radicalizing Israelis against you even more. It's never going to push Israelis to vote for leaders that want to make peace with you. Because even if Israeli leaders lie to the population and tell them, oh, we're not making peace with Palestinians, then they'll be voted out and the peace plans will be cancelled. So attacks within Israel, majority of Israelis will never look at them positively. I would say 99%, like all of Israelis will never look at them positively. An armed struggle within the West Bank against settlers, I think even some Israeli Jews would be accepting of that because they don't agree with they think it's an obstacle to peace, that our settlements exist, settlers exist. They think it's an obstacle to peace. So I think removing the settlements and the settlers is one from Israel's side. From the Palestinian side, like I said, probably not attacking Israel within the West Bank, voting for less radical, well, when they can vote, to vote for less radical parties, to focus on parties that want to better their lives rather than hurt Israel.
So right now, it looks like there's very little chance of an Israeli government extending an
He's being obnoxious because he saw the camera. He's being obnoxious.
So far, it looks like there's very little chance of an Israeli government extending the first olive branch to peace, or starting something fresh. From the Palestinian side, again, it seems like if they had an election in the West Bank tomorrow, Hamas would win by a landslide.
Fortunately.
So, where do you think that first step needs to come from? Do you think it can happen without someone coming in from the outside of them, or
without someone from the outside? I don't think there's ever been a situation similar to this, but there was situations who are you could maybe compare them to this, where it's always needed to be an outside factor to intervene.
Mm.
There's never been, or at least like for example, unfortunately, a lot of Palestinians look at this like the French occupation of Algeria, and Israelis do not look at this as an occupation. Like when I say occupation, I mean the entire country.
Okay.
That's how a lot of Palestinians think of it. The entire country is occupied, not just like the West Bank, which obviously I don't agree with. I agree that the West Bank is occupied. Fuck, you're gonna have to repeat your question. I rambled.
Oh, I was just asking about where you think the. So you don't think like the first push for peace, like the first olive branch for peace, is
From
probably
the
gonna have to be-
Palestinian
it's
side?
gonna have to- I don't know. I think. Does it feel like it's going to have to come from outside, or is it more likely to come from Israel or Palestine?
I don't think it's gonna come from Palestinians or Israel. I
Yeah.
think maybe Israel in like 20 to 30 years, if we're gonna wait that long. If you don't want to wait that long, it's probably gonna be an outside source that does this, an outside party that forces either Palestinians or Israel's hand. Whether I don't think you can force Palestinians because they don't have anything to be forced on, while Israel can't be forced on. And I think that's what Israelis are always aware of. Palestinians can't be forced on anything because they don't have anything, while Israelis can be forced on something because they have like the Western approval that they have to always rely on from countries, which this recent war has like jeopardized that.
Okay. Last thing, I had that the old Jewish couple we were talking to earlier. I asked them if they thought the rest of the world was on Israel's side, and they said no. I asked if they were on the Palestinian side, and they were like, yeah. And I
Yeah.
said even Europe and America, and they said, well, maybe not America, Europe, who knows. What do you think? Do you think the rest of the world is on Israel's side, or?
I think it's a lot more complicated than being on someone's side. I think a lot of politicians want to obviously are way more aware than the general population. The general population just wants to see less dead people for the most part. They will go off whatever they hear from the next person rather than research it themselves. So I think a lot more people on the streets are with the Palestinians. But when I say people in offices, I generally think like politicians, like governments. I would say they're generally on Israel's side.
Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cool.
Good stuff.
Huh?
About 22 and a half minutes.
Okay, damn. That's a full video for you. Oh, something slipped into my shirt here.
Oh, nice.
Is
That's
it
the
broken?
magnet. Huh?
Is it broken?
No. That's the magnet.
Oh, it's a
It's
magnet.
like an extra backup. You can just you can just put it here. Slap
Should have asked if you have any memes.
Memes?
Yeah.
on. You want to?
No, it's alright.
What do you mean memes?
Like I don't know, shit on Sundowner or something.
Oh, fuck. No, I'm not gonna shit on Sundown.
Or David.